Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Keynote podcast. I'm your host, Solaris, and I interview up-and-coming producers in the electronic music scene. Today, I'm joined by Troy, aka Similar Outskirts.
Hey everyone.
Troy is a producer from California. He makes a lot of music that kind of combines melodic music and bass music in a way that he has been kind of coining online as honesty and melodies. He's been making a lot of steady growth over the past 8 years or so that he's been producing music. He's had 2 EPs on UK-based music producer Chime's record label Rushdown, and has just been kind of a major name in the rise of the color-based movement that has been recently happening in EDM. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So first of all, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about your recent release. I've been really enjoying it, the Hanging by a Thread remix, and I'm really rooting for you. With this time around with the Disciple remix competition, because I remember when the first one came out, and we kind of all these small talents were recognized. I mean, people, for example, people like Skybreak and Sharks, who we've been really kind of seeing make a name for themselves, who also kind of won that competition. It's just been really cool to kind of see that Disciple is still continuing to support small talent, and I'm really rooting for you this time.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that remix was kind of a little bit out of the blue because I really just downloaded the stems, not really expecting much. But one day I just decided, let's just play around with the stems, see what happens. I actually got the remix done fairly quick, at least by my standards. It was only took a couple days, but I was super happy with the final product. So yeah, I'm really happy to actually put it out and enter in the contest.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, like I said, we're all rooting for you, Troy.
Thanks.
All right. And so then kind of let's go into a little bit more about your kind of, history as, a producer and all that. So kind of what was it that, first got you into music? Like, was it something that, were always interested in?
Yeah, sure. When it comes to music in general, I think I've always just loved music. I remember when I was a kid, anytime I was in the car with my family and the radio would come on, I would always just be singing my heart out to all the pop tunes from the radio, and I really grew up on a lot of that stuff because it was super interesting and cool to me. Yeah, in terms of maybe just like electronic music in general, um, I would say it started maybe around 2011. I remember my brother was listening to the Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites EP by Skrillex. And at the time, I'll admit, I thought it was super weird. Like, what the hell is this? But of course, I came around to it, and it was like, all this electronic and dance music, it's kind of cool. And definitely around that time, I think that pop music in general and things that were on the radio, a lot of it was starting to like delve more into the electronic dance music scene. Artists like Zed were putting out stuff like Clarity and Spectrum around that time. So I really got into electronic music because of that.
Yeah. So then kind of, I guess, production then, kind of, what was it that kind of got you into production?
Yeah, sure. When it came to production, it started mostly because I started looking online for new music to listen to. While I was searching online, I found a lot of really underground artists that were putting out really, really cool stuff. And I also found out that at the time, they were around my age. I was like, what, 13, 14, around that time. And I thought, wow, this is really, really cool. And like, maybe this is something I could get into, just so I downloaded some software, downloaded Ableton and, all the other classic synths like Massive and whatnot. And I didn't look back. I just had fun.
Mm-hmm. And so kind of with that, is music something that you do full time? Just curious.
Um, kinda not. I did have a day job earlier. Um, yeah, I have left recently. Just because I wanted to focus a little bit more on music, just for the time being, just for a little break, just to see where I can go with it. Luckily, I'm just being supported by my family right now, and they're very kind to just support me along the way. So yeah, I guess you could consider music to be full time now. I suppose it's more of just like a trial period to see, hey, where is this gonna go, and just to try things out.
Hmm. And so with that, like if it weren't for, finding, Ableton, which is the DAW that you use and all that,
Mhm.
where would you kind of have seen yourself now? Do you think you would have seen yourself on a different path instead of music?
It's really hard to say, because honestly, music has just been that one thing in my life. I really just enjoyed it throughout. I remember like when I was a kid, I tried out a bunch of different like hobbies and stuff. I tried video editing at one point that didn't really go anywhere. I tried playing with a yo-yo at one point, and I kind of just dropped it after a while. Um, but yeah, music was just that one thing where it's like, you know what, I can always be into this. I can always get into it. I love listening to it. I love making it. Doesn't matter what time of the day. So it's really, really hard to say where I would have been without music, you know?
Did you have any like musical background kind of before?
Yeah. When I was I think I was 10 years old when I had my first piano lessons. That was probably the start of when it comes to somewhat professional, formal training of music. Um, and then since then, I've had other sort of lessons and classes throughout high school about music. I was also in my high school's concert band. Where I played drums. Um, yeah, yeah. Just throughout my life, I've had a couple lessons and stuff here and there.
But, so I guess like music production has always kind of been the main thing for you, just along, your musical journey then?
Definitely, definitely, yeah. Music production has just been the main thing for me when it comes to music.
And so then with the name Similar Outskirts, and you have been producing, for almost 10 years now, which is crazy. Um, so with the name Similar Outskirts, did you have any names before that? And what led you to Similar Outskirts?
Oh yeah, I did have a couple of previous aliases beforehand, but I generally don't really like to mention them or talk about them too much because usually I've moved on from those projects and I'm very much happy with the Similar Outskirts project I have going here. What led me to Similar Outskirts was just well, in terms of just starting the alias, I just wanted something a bit more formal and a bit more grounded, a bit more solid when it comes to the idea, and also just a name that I was a lot more satisfied with. You know?
Mhm. And so then I guess with your logo specifically, since I kind of see, the shape of just like, this like terrain and this like sun, is that kind of like supposed to kind of represent like the similar outskirts in a way then?
That's a very good question, and admit right now, I have no idea what the logo is supposed to mean. So
Okay.
it's just honestly, it was just I was like 16 or something, and really, I just wanted to draw something cool and something that stuck, and this is the one that just turned up. So I decided to use it.
Yeah. It is kind of, interesting to kind of hear, people who kind of, say that like, oh, this really had no meaning when, somebody tries to like put a meaning to it.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'll just be very honest and frank. It doesn't really mean, at least at the time when I made it, it didn't really mean much. Now it's just like it looks cool, and I love it for my brand. So
Yeah. Like, the way I always saw it, was, like, when I thought of, like, the name Similar Outskirts, I was kinda thinking of just, like, like, these, like, mountains, and
yeah,
then
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
A lot of people. So I've had different people come to me. It's like, hey, what is this like logo? Is it a ghost or something, or is it an island? Or I think originally in my head I was like, it's going to be a floating island with a moon in the background. The problem is that when you turn it into a white, transparent, logo, it doesn't really look like that. But yeah, it still looks cool.
Yeah. So, yeah, cause like yeah, and so with that, I guess kind of bouncing off of that with kind of, music and just kind of, being creative in general, where do you kinda draw a lot of inspiration from? Like, musically, And like, with other creative mediums, since, you've been recently, kind of getting into, kind of like graphic design with a lot of your recent output.
Sure, sure. I generally I try to take really any experience I've had throughout my life and try to incorporate it into my music. Um, whether it be just the themes I want to write about, or the actual like musical techniques and stuff that I use in my songwriting. Um, in terms of the music, I'm definitely just inspired by all the music that I love to listen to. I love listening to, of course, all this EDM stuff, dubstep and electro, happy hardcore, everything and all that. In terms of other music, I love listening to like rock and alternative. I really love listening to, especially J rock. I just find that all the musical techniques and stuff uh, that you'd find in Japanese pop culture is just so interesting and cool to me that I just really want to use it in my music. Um, in terms of other inspirations from my project, uh, I love anyone that's followed me on social media or just knows me as a person is that I love anime and I love animation in general. Um, there's just something about animation where it's like uh, you can't really. There's some things about animation that you can only express in animation. There's a certain vibe that you can only give off in animation compared to like uh, IRL people and acting and all that. Not to say that one is better than the other or one is inferior than the other. It's just a medium that I like to vibe with. Um, and when you watch like animation stuff, you have like all these bright colors and all these different facial expressions that you can draw. Um, you can have body movements and stuff that you can only capture in animation. I find all that super super interesting and super cool. So I try to incorporate that kind of style and that kind of vibe into my music, or I guess to that extent, also in my artworks.
And so kind of, bouncing off of that, just kind of, mentioning the fact that, you talk about how with animation, there's like only certain things that you feel like can be expressed via, animation. Would you say it's kind of the same thing with like music?
I guess maybe in a way there are some things that can only be expressed in music. Maybe in terms of like I said, I guess maybe genre. Um, when it comes to like just electronic music, there is the freedom of like sound design and stuff like that, where you can start to express where the song can express itself in ways that you generally can't really capture when it comes to just using traditional instruments, which is fine and all that. It's just a different way of expressing yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then, you talk about like I guess music in general, and I think a more specific question is if I were to like open up your Spotify right now and kind of see like which artists necessarily you were listening to, who would I see on that list?
Well, I guess back then, I guess now also like some of my favorite just um my favorite artists in the electronic music scene were like people like Temanite and Chime. I really, really vibe with their music. Just that fusion of heavy sounds and the melodic elements with it was something I really, really, really liked and really wanted to strive for um, back then and now. Um, and of course, I'm always inspired by all the friends that I meet and all the people I meet. Um, they always inspire me with new when it comes to new musical techniques or just new themes to write about. Um, and of course, there's a couple of. I'm looking at my Spotify right now, actually. So there's just I can go through a list of a bunch of people like Virtual Riot. I'm really inspired by Virtual Riot stuff. Um, some of DDD's music is really really dope. Been listening to Little Moe Shop, some Porter Robinson, of course, because his album just came out recently. Some Must Die, all that in terms of electronic music. Um, I can also go back to just some non-electronic stuff. Um, recently, I've been really in listening to a Japanese artist called Sangatsu no Fantasia. They make this kind of a just some kind of like J rock alternative, quite a variety of different kind of Japanese music. Um, and also, I guess when I was younger, um, I listened to a lot of punk, pop punk, and stuff like that. Like My Chemical Romance, Rise Against, The Offspring. I'm just going down a huge list, but yeah, those are a bunch of names that really inspire me in my music.
I just looked up Sangatsu no Fantasia. I think I'm gonna have to listen to them after this podcast now.
Good, they're very very good.
And so kind of with that, I guess a good question for you is, what's your favorite song you've made to date? I mean, I guess we'll be a little bit more specific here with stuff that's, out now, since I know a lot of people who probably want to answer this question want to say that it's stuff that's, not out yet.
Absolutely, yeah.
So,
I love like all the stuff that I haven't put out yet. But in terms of the music that I have put out, which is also very hard to say even then, because I'm really, really proud of the music that I've put out, especially in the past uh 2 3 years, I'd say. I'm super,
mhm,
super proud of all of them. But if I did have to pick one, I'd probably say my track "Find My Way," which I put out in February of this year. I just think with that song, I really captured the exact vibe I was going for. The whole heavy melodic drops, but also like the non-drop sections, which were so pretty, so nostalgic. I love using the word nostalgic from a music. It's just such a feeling that I really want to incorporate with all my music. Um, it's like when my listeners listen to my music, I want them to feel a sense of nostalgia. I want them to feel like, wow, I'm reliving a childhood that I didn't know I had, or yeah, someone else's childhood. Um, yeah, and I guess on top of all that, I just think the mix down was pretty solid, so that's always a plus.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, like with your track "In the Moment," for example, I think that's a really kind of good example is like with the lyrics that you kind of, have in that song. And
Hmm.
also, you say in your SoundCloud, this is like bring back like early 2010s electro because like
Yeah.
I remember when I kind of, got into EDM, and I mean, with like a lot of these people who I've interviewed on the show, we all kind of had this similar way of, getting into, music through, like Minecraft YouTubers
Oh,
and all that,
absolutely. Yeah,
and their
100%.
EDM, yeah, and like finding like, labels like NCS and Monster Cat and all that when
Mhm.
we were like 11 or 12 or something before like even, we should be allowed to be using the internet.
Yeah, for sure, like, within the moment specifically, I really wanted to capture that, like, early 2010s, electro vibe, stuff like from, like, Astronaut and Stonebank and Let's Be Friends, that kind of style of electro I really, really love. And I just wanted to give a more fresh take on it, I guess, not quote unquote fresh, a more modern take on it. So that's how In the Moment came to be.
Mhm. So yeah, just I guess with that kind of, with this whole kind of, idea, since like I've said earlier in the podcast, you've been producing for almost a decade now.
Mhm.
And so kind of how would you say you've evolved as an artist then?
When I first started, I definitely felt more. Um, I- there w- I wouldn't say I had like a coherent theme or even thought process for all the stuff that I wrote when I was first starting out. Definitely in the first, I'd say 5, maybe even 6 years of me starting. Oh, yeah, I mean 5 years. Yeah, the first 5 years of me doing production stuff was mostly just me just fooling around, just making stuff and making cool stuff. I definitely say that in my more recent years, I've tried to keep more of a consistent and coherent branding. Um, there's definitely nowadays there's definitely a style that I'm trying to aim for. I have a much clearer vision of how I want my music to sound.
Mhm. And so kind of with, going off of that there with, recently you've been kind of, I guess, kind of been creating more of a kind of consistent brand in a way with, all of these kind of artworks that you've been putting out for all of your stuff that you've been releasing that all
Mhm.
have like these colors and these drawings and all that. And it just is very consistent in a way. Was that like, so for example, like how did that kind of, come to be then?
Oh, sure, sure, yeah. I think it started. I want to say late 2019, early 2020, especially when it came to I think the artwork for Crescent, or maybe the artwork for Simulation 2. That's where it started, where I started um, just drawing a bit more. I recently just, I mean, a year or two ago, I just dug up my old sketchbook from when I was a kid, and I'm just using that to just draw random stuff, really, just to see what came to mind. Um, and yeah, for these artworks that I've been putting out recently, all it's a little bit still inconsistent in a way. Maybe like just the way they're formatted and the way they're kind of drawn is kind of consistent, but the theme around it isn't really consistent at all. This is me mostly like experimenting and trying things out. Um, with all the artwork from Crescent and onward, it was just me drawing cool stuff, some random stuff, and I thought, you know what, this would be great just to slap on an artwork. Because I'd say before, like um, maybe somewhere in the middle of 2019 and before that, all my artwork didn't really have much of a consistent theme to it, as I've mentioned before. So now I'm trying to slowly get into a more consistent look, and I think starting 2022, I think I'll have a much more consistent look to my brand.
Another question that I had for you then is, what is it that you kind of enjoy about, being an artist?
I like the freedom I have with it. And I think that really just goes for any creative medium whatsoever. Just the fact that I can write I can write whatever music I want. I can put notes wherever I want, put drums wherever I want, and then I can render that out, and then I can make the artwork myself. Like I could open up Photoshop, just put some drawings I drew in a notebook together, and then I can post that on the internet, and then I can distribute all that music on my own, and then I can show it to people, saying, "Hey, here is something that I put so much time and effort, and here's music that I really love and really um, and here's music that's so genuine to me and so honest to what I love. Can I would love for you to listen to this." Um, just that just that whole creative freedom and the ability to share with other people and in hopes to hopefully make them happier or something. I just love that aspect of being an artist.
Yeah. And so kind of, bouncing off of that there with, you said like some about like being honest in what you love, and you've been using the term honesty and melodies a lot on your social media. Is that kind of that idea then?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. One of my one of my one of the main things just about myself personally is just that I always wanted to just present myself in the most genuine and honest way possible. I try not to be quote unquote fake with other people. I try not to be someone I'm not. I really want to present myself as someone who's me, and I really wanted that to reflect in my music nowadays. Um, and probably the best way for me to show that genuine feelings is through the melodies that I write. Um, when it comes to just me listening to music or me writing music, melodies are definitely the main thing, the most important thing for me. I love just a good, catchy melody, which is something that I try to write with all of my music. Um, so if you just put two and two together, I love presenting myself and representing my honest feelings through the melodies that I write.
All right. And so then kind of going back to the question that I asked about, what is it that you enjoy about being an artist? On the other hand of that, what do you find to be the most challenging aspect of being an artist?
Uh, Definitely. Well, I mean, where do I start, right? Because there's competitive nature is a huge thing. Um, well, first of all, I wouldn't consider myself necessarily a competitive person. I try not to have the mindset of uh, me comparing myself to other people and to other music too much. You can do a little bit. A little is fine. There's a healthy amount. But Some days if you're just not feeling the best or something, or you're just not feeling like yourself, sometimes just you can't help but just compare yourself to other people and think, wow, my some the thing are the things that I'm writing or the things I'm doing like worth it? Am I really quote unquote inferior to other people? But that kind of mindset, it sucks and it comes every so often. But I try not to dwell on that kind of stuff too much. I think a lot of um, creative people just feel that way. They can all share that kind of sentiment. Um, and I guess maybe more from just like a technical standpoint. Sometimes like uh, you know, writing music isn't uh, the easiest. Sometimes you'll just have a bad day, or even maybe a bad week, or even maybe a bad month for some people. So sometimes that can take a toll on you. Um, yeah.
And so kind of relating to that in a way with, the idea of just like writer's block in general, how do you deal with it? How do you deal with writer's block?
Hmm. I think there's two things to think about. The first thing is to have patience. Um, I think that um, forcing the results is forcing the result and rushing things. Um, you're most likely not going to be satisfied with the end result, no matter what. Um, it's good to just take some time to think. It's okay to work at your own pace. Everyone does things in their life at their own pace, and there's nothing wrong with taking the time you need. Um, you could spend maybe a day taking a break. You could spend a week. You could spend a month. You maybe even spend a year taking a break, um, and that's okay. That's okay to know um, that you just need some time to think about things. That you just need some time for things to come to you instead of you chasing after some things. I think another thing to think about is that another really good way of breaking writer's block is just to experience other things in your life. Because not everything revolves around music and music production. Like, I love listening to music, I love writing music, but I like doing other things in my life too. I like watching some shows, I like hanging out with my friends, I like doing all these other cool things. I think when it comes to writing music, there you can get inspiration and stuff from listening to other people's music. But I think another great source of just getting inspiration is just from anything else, literally. I mean, I talked about the whole like watching anime and animation and stuff like that. I think that's a really good source of inspiration for me then to then bring back into my songwriting process.
Mhm. And so then kind of with that, with your songwriting process, how does that kind of work? How does your creative process kind of work when you go about with writing music?
Sure. I usually start with the drop, um, which is which is probably somewhat uncommon. A lot of people like to start with the intro because they know how the narrative is written out throughout the track, and then they can write the drop. For me, I'm just simply comfortable writing a cool drop. I throw some sounds together, and hopefully it works out. And I save that, and I kind of once I get the actual drop itself like written out, then I start thinking, okay, what's the theme of this track? Is it supposed to be a hype track? Am I supposed to be low key and kind of kick back? Um, what are some feelings that I want the listener to listen to? What are the feelings that I want to experience when I listen to this track? Um, and from there, I just kind of experiment and try different things when it comes to writing the intro and the breakdown and the outro and all that. I'll listen to some music every now and then if I really need to get some technical inspiration, see what other producers have used to try to use in my own tracks. Um, and hopefully it all works out. That can take, and the whole songwriting process can take like a couple days. Like, for example, my Hanging by a Thread remix, or it could take months or even more than a year for some of my other tracks.
So is there ever like a purpose or a goal that you have in mind when like you're writing music then? Because I know with like you talked about, 'cause since, you kind of go through this uncommon workflow of starting with the drop rather than like starting with the intro and then just kind of, letting the narrative kind of set its course,
Mhm.
with starting with the intro and then going on from there. Is there any kind of purpose or goal in mind that you always kind of start when you're writing a song in from like with the drop then?
I think I think I start setting it's weird because I think I start setting the goal while I'm writing the track. It's weird. I don't know why, but for me, it's like if I have the idea in my head or I have a plan in mind, it just does not go that way for some reason. It just does not work out. I don't know. For the most part, that's just me. Um, yeah, I write a decent amount of the track, especially the drop, and then I start thinking, okay, what's the goal or the purpose of this track?
Yeah. All right. And so then kind of, going on with, just kind of, inspirations in general. A fun question that I always like to ask people is about dream collaborations. Is there like anybody you'd love to collaborate with, whether or not you know them personally?
Um, the thing about me is that I actually generally stray away from collabs nowadays. And if you guys look at my discography, I haven't put out. Well, okay, I've put out collabs for. I've done collabs with some of my close friends for an
I mean,
event
there's
called.
Winamp boys.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So there is that for those listening, there's an event called All Nighter where you write an entire track in the span of 24 hours and submit it for a sort of compilation album. And I did that two times with some of my close friends. I will admit that the mindset I have for an event like All Nighter where you write a track in 24 hours is definitely different than say the mindset I would have writing a track with one or two more other people for a big plan release and all that. Um, for an event with some of my close friends, a very quick event, it's more like let's just have fun. Let's just throw stuff together. Let's see what happens. Um, but going back to the Dream Collab thing, that's the thing is that I generally stray away from like formal long term collabs. Um, for a variety of reasons. I think one of them is just I generally I think I work better by myself, definitely. I'm also, I would say, a control freak when it comes to my music. I definitely want things to sound exactly the way I want it to sound in my music, and admittedly, the selfish part of me is just like I don't want to give that up for many other people. Um, Another thing is just that, um, uh, it's also sometimes a hassle to work. I mean, I don't want to put down like collabs in general for other people, but I mean, just like I want to work at my own pace. Sometimes if I'm not feeling something, I feel like I'm dragging the other person down or something like that. Um, it's just overall management wise, it's kind of easier to work by yourself in a way. Of course, that's all me. That's just me.
All right. So we're kind of wrapping up on a little bit of our time here. And so a question that I always like to ask everybody is like, what kind of advice would you have, given to yourself, when you first started out then?
Um, oh man, it's a little tough. I think that when I started the when I started out, things were totally different than how people start out now. When I started in 2012, there was no serum, there was no splice. There were not very many readily available resources for people to pick up production as much as it is now. Um, but I guess the some quick pointers would be like, well, I guess um, going back to what I said before, it's just have patience with yourself. Um, it's okay to learn at your own pace. Everyone works differently, and also try to experience other things in your life. Um, if you're experiencing writer's block, go watch a show, eat a sandwich. I don't know, literally anything else besides make music, and try to get some kind of inspiration from that. Um, Also, when it comes to starting out new music and trying to grow, definitely try to make some friends and meet some new people who are also starting out with you. Growing up together definitely helps because you start to learn from one another. Um, I think sometimes some feedback sessions help. I know there are a ton of people on Twitch and YouTube that love to do feedback sessions where a more experienced artist will critique your track and tell you what you can maybe change, what you can improve about your skills. Um, and know your resources. There's again, like I said back then, I wouldn't say there's as many resources compared to now. Now we have Splice where we can get amazing like drum samples really quick. Um, and we have all these free VSTs and softwares like a Vital that are super powerful, and you can get some like insane stuff out of it. Um, and yeah, always keep learning. Um, just try to learn as much as you can, and don't burn yourself out. Yeah.
And so then I guess a question that's probably like a really bad question because to quote Skybreak on one of my episodes, you don't know what you don't know, but is there anything that you're still kind of curious about learning about with production?
Oh, yeah. I don't know what I don't know really. I'm just the kind of person that kind of just goes with the flow. Really. I learn things as along the way. There's rarely I'll go out of my way to kind of learn specifically what I want to learn about. I'm just kind of like, I'll learn things as I go. Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then one of my final questions here is there anything that I didn't ask that you think that you're, really kind of wishing I asked? Is there anything that, I should have asked but didn't?
Um, no, nothing in particular. I don't think. Can I plug myself now or?
Here's the last question then. Is there like just kind of wanting to know what's next, or are there any kind of plans for the future that we can expect from you then?
Sure, sure. Yeah, I have a couple more releases lined up for the rest of the year. Still working on some new music, of course. I do plan to put out an EP this year, which hopefully will come out soon. There's no date or label in mind, but keep a lookout for that.
Well, that is exciting. And so, with that, that's going to do it for this episode of the Keynote podcast. I'd like to give a huge thanks to Troy for agreeing to be on the show today and just being such a nice person to talk to. I'm going to be linking his social media in the description of whatever platform you're going to be listening to this podcast on. So that covers, you plugging yourself. So, anyways, I hope you all enjoyed today's episode. And if you did, please be sure to give me a follow. And I hope you all stay tuned in for next week. Thanks so much for listening.